My name is Anya Petrova. Before my life became a lesson in quiet rebellion, it was a tapestry woven from the mists of Havenwood, a city built where the river meets the sea. The rhythm of life was dictated by the tide, and the scent of salt water and pine was the only perfume that mattered. My father was a cartographer of the seafloor, a man who found beauty in the unseen depths, and my mother was a storyteller who could spin worlds from the patterns of moss on an old stone wall. From them, I inherited a love for the stories that lie just beneath the surface, the connections that bind us but are rarely spoken aloud. This love led me not to the sea or the forest, but to the sprawling, concrete canyons of the city. I believed that, even in the heart of a metropolis, in the clamor of commerce and ambition, there were essential human stories waiting to be told. I became a creative strategist, someone who listens to the soul of a brand and helps it find its voice. And I was good at it. My portfolio, filled with campaigns that felt more like poetry than advertisements, was my map to a new world. It led me to the gleaming glass doors of Sterling and Grove, one of the most prestigious agencies in the country, and to the woman who would both build and nearly break me, Isabella Thorne. The first time I met her, she was like a piece of modern sculptural clean lines, polished surfaces, and an aura of formidable, expensive grace. She sat across a vast mahogany desk, my portfolio spread before her like a deck of tarot cards she was about to interpret. "Your work has a heartbeat, Anya," she said, her voice a low, melodious hum that filled the cavernous office. "It's rare. People in this business are so focused on shouting that they forget how to whisper. And a whisper, at the right moment, is far more powerful." She promised me a home for my ideas, a place where my gentle, narrative-driven approach would be not just accepted, but celebrated. For the first year, it felt like a dream. Isabella was my champion. She saw the potential in my most unconventional concepts and gave me the space to nurture them from fragile seedlings into towering, magnificent trees. I felt seen. I felt I had found my place in this new, bewildering forest of steel and glass. I was creating work that mattered, and for a while, that was enough. The first tremor, the first sign that the ground beneath my feet was not as solid as it seemed, came with the Maison du Bois account. They were a heritage perfumery, a local institution on the brink of irrelevance, their classic scents dismissed by a younger generation as something their grandmothers would wear. The brief was to make them matter again. I spent weeks walking the misty streets of Havenwood, thinking about scent and memory. I remembered the smell of my father's old leather jacket, the faint aroma of jasmine from my mother's garden on a summer evening. Scent wasn't about luxury, it was about time travel. It was a key that unlocked our most deeply held memories. From this, the campaign was born, the architecture of memory. We didn't show glamorous models in expensive gowns. We showed a young woman's face, her eyes closed, as she inhaled the scent from her wrist, a subtle smile playing on her lips as a montage of fleeting, personal moments flashed by a child's hand in hers, the pages of a beloved book, rain on a windowpane. The tagline was simple, Maison du Bois. What will you remember? It was risky, subtle, and deeply emotional. It was everything their previous marketing was not. The campaign was a phenomenal success. Sales surged by over 50%. The industry press wrote glowing articles. Award nominations followed. At the celebratory dinner, our CEO, Mr. Davies, raised a glass. To Isabella, he boomed, for her brilliant, visionary leadership on the Maison du Bois revival. Isabella stood, a picture of grace and humility, and accepted the applause. "When I first conceived of this memory-based approach," she said, her voice smooth as silk, "I knew it was a risk, but I believed we needed to connect with our audience on a more human level." I sat there, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth, the congratulatory smile I'd prepared turning to plaster on my face. She hadn't just accepted the praise, she had actively claimed the genesis of the idea. My idea. She never once mentioned my name. Later that evening, as the rain fell in a soft, persistent drizzle outside the restaurant, I found her waiting for her car. Isabella, I began, my voice tighter than I intended. That was my concept. I spent weeks developing it. You didn't even mention my team. She fussed with the collar of her cashmere coat, her gaze fixed on the slick, dark street. Don't be so naive, Anya. We're a team. The firm's success is what matters. When the team wins, we all win. It doesn't feel like a team win when one person takes all the credit, I countered, the injustice of it a bitter taste in my mouth. Her eyes finally met mine, and they were cold, stripped of their earlier warmth. You're talented, but you're still junior. I've been in this business for 15 years. I've built the relationships and the reputation that allow for ideas like yours to even be heard. When you get to my level, you'll understand how the game is played. I should have walked away then. I should have polished my portfolio and found a place where team wasn't a euphemism for feudal system. But I stayed. The work was challenging, and the salary was more than I'd ever earned. More importantly, the firm's health insurance was exceptional. It was a golden chain, and it was wrapped around my mother's well-being. My mother, Elena, was my anchor. A retired botanist, she was a woman who saw the world in terms of root systems and patient growth. Now, her own body was betraying her. A severe, aggressive form of rheumatoid arthritis was twisting her joints, making the simple act of holding a teacup an exercise in agony. The only thing that kept the inflammation at bay, that allowed her to tend to her small, beloved garden, was a series of biologic infusions that cost more per month than my rent. Without my insurance, those treatments would be an impossible dream. So I stayed, telling myself I could navigate the game Isabella spoke of. I told myself it would get better. It didn't. The pattern was set. I would pour my heart and soul into developing a strategy. I'd find the emotional core, the human truth that would make it resonate. Then, a day or two before the client presentation, Isabella would call me into her office for a final review. She would walk into that meeting with my slides, my words, having made a few superficial tweaks, and present it as our collaborative vision, with the emphasis always on her guiding hand. When a campaign succeeded, it was Isabella's strategic genius. When one fell flat, it was Anya's creative execution that missed the mark. My salary stagnated while she received bonuses for the revenue my work generated. Promotions I was qualified for went to others, men and women who were better at playing the political game, who understood that their primary job was to make Isabella look good. I started keeping a record. Not for revenge, or so I told myself, but for protection. I created a private folder on my personal drive, a meticulous archive of every concept deck, every email chain, every first draft. I documented the evolution of each idea, a clear, time-stamped trail that showed where the work originated. It was a silent act of rebellion, a way of holding onto the truth, even if no one else ever saw it. The breaking point arrived a year ago. Aura Innovations, our largest and most valuable client, was threatening to put their account up for review. They were a tech giant, and they wanted a campaign that was nothing short of revolutionary. Isabella summoned me to her office. The tension was palpable. Her usual composure was frayed at the edges. Aura is on the line, she said, skipping the pleasantries. We need a miracle, Anya. Mr. Davies specifically requested you lead the creative on this. A small, foolish flicker of hope ignited within me. Finally. Recognition from the top. But then she continued, her eyes narrowing. Of course, I will need to supervise very closely. The stakes are far too high for your usual experimental approach. The translation was clear. I would do the work, she would hold the reins, and if it succeeded, she would ride the victory across the finish line. I dove in, developing a campaign that was more of a philosophy than an advertisement. It was about how technology, at its best, could foster genuine human connection rather than isolate us. It was intimate, challenging, and unlike anything Aura had ever done. The client, to my astonishment, loved it. They embraced the risk. The campaign was a cultural phenomenon. Sales for their new product line shattered all projections. At the National Industry Awards that year, Isabella stood on the stage, bathed in the spotlight, clutching the gleaming gold trophy for Campaign of the Year. "I've always believed that true innovation requires courage," she declared to the rapt audience. "This campaign represents the culmination of everything I've worked toward in my career." My name appeared on a credit slide in a tiny font for approximately 3 seconds. That night, something inside me didn't just break, it hardened. I wasn't going to quit. That would be letting her win. I wasn't going to complain to HR, which would paint me as a disgruntled employee and do nothing to change the system. I was going to play the long game. Isabella's game, but with my own rules. I became more strategic. In large meetings, I'd make sure to preface my ideas with building on the data David's team pulled, or, as Chloe from Legal and I discussed, weaving a web of collaborators that made it harder for Isabella to isolate and claim my work. I started building quiet, direct relationships with our clients, becoming their trusted creative counsel. They began to recognize my signature stylia blend of empathy and artistry that couldn't be easily replicated. Isabella noticed. Her tactics grew more desperate. 6 months ago, she assigned me 3 massive, simultaneous projects, each with an absurdly short deadline. It was a classic move, designed to make me fail. Succeed, and I'd be burned out. Fail, and she'd have the proof she needed that I couldn't handle the pressure. I accepted the workload without a word of complaint. What she didn't know is that this was the moment I had been preparing for. I poured myself into the work, but this time, with a dual purpose. I developed 3 brilliant, groundbreaking strategies. The preliminary presentations wowed the clients. The plans were innovative, bold, and if implemented exactly as Isabella was now insisting, deeply problematic. For Ether Digital, a massive, data-obsessed tech firm, she insisted on a data-gathering component that bordered on invasive, pushing aside my concerns about user privacy. "We need to be aggressive, Anya. The data is the gold." For Loom and Leaf, a new sustainable fashion brand, she stripped away the detailed sourcing and labor transparency I had built in, claiming it cluttered the aspirational message. With the financial firm, she pushed for language that was subtly misleading about investment returns, calling it optimistic framing. I finally understood her true endgame. These weren't just difficult projects, they were poisoned chalices. The strategies, as she was demanding they be implemented, were designed to create spectacular short-term results. But months down the line, they would inevitably implode. Ether Digital would face a privacy backlash. Loom and Leaf would be accused of greenwashing. The financial firm would face regulatory scrutiny. And by then, Isabella would have ensured that the paper trail, the execution plans, all led directly, exclusively, to me. So I worked on 2 tracks. For Isabella and the official record, I documented her directives meticulously, saving every email where she pushed for the riskier approach. "Let's not get bogged down in compliance, Anya. Let's focus on impact," she'd write. I'd save the email, then save my original, compliant proposal. In secret, I built the real campaigns. The versions that were not only brilliant, but also ethical and sustainable. The versions that would build long-term trust and success for the clients. I created a complete, parallel set of deliverables, a shadow project built on integrity. My secret archive was no longer just about self-preservation, it had become a repository of the truth. Then, just as the campaigns were nearing their final launch phase, my body gave out. The exhaustion, the stress, the relentless Havenwood damp, it all coalesced into a brutal case of pneumonia. I was confined to my bed, the world shrinking to the 4 walls of my small apartment, the sound of the rain a constant, mournful drumbeat. I worried my careful plans would fall apart. But as the fever raged, a chilling clarity emerged. Isabella wouldn't see my illness as a setback. She would see it as a gift. An opportunity. With me out of the picture, she could take sole credit for the initial success, and then, when the inevitable backlash occurred, I would be the perfect, absent scapegoat. My colleagues' behavior on brief video calls confirmed my fears. Their glances were furtive, their answers to my questions vague. Emails went unanswered. Decisions were being made without me. The phone's harsh ring jolted me from a feverish sleep. 2:38 a.m. My thermometer had read 103 degrees earlier that evening. The pneumonia had taken root in my lungs, making each breath a shallow, painful effort. The room spun as I fumbled for the phone. Hello. My voice was a dry rasp, my throat raw. Anya. It was Isabella. Her voice was as crisp and cool as a winter morning, utterly devoid of warmth or concern. No preamble. No, how are you feeling? Just the clean, swift slice of a blade. I'm letting you go. Your position has been eliminated, effective immediately. Your projects are being reassigned. We'll have your personal effects couriered to you. Goodbye. The words should have shattered me. 3 years of my life, my creative soul poured into that company, the security that kept my mother's treatment going all severed in a 10-second call while I was too sick to even sit up straight. But as the finality of her words settled in the quiet room, a strange and profound calm washed over me. It was the stillness after a storm, the silence after a fever breaks. Okay, I whispered, the single word costing me a surprising amount of breath. There was a beat of silence on her end. What do you mean, okay? The confidence in her tone faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. A small, breathy laugh escaped me, which immediately triggered a racking cough. I pressed a hand to my chest, waiting for the spasm to pass. What's so funny? She demanded, her voice sharp with irritation. Through labored breaths, I managed to reply. Nothing, Isabella. You just have no idea what you've done. Are you threatening me? Her voice pitched higher, a note of alarm creeping in. Not at all, I said, and a genuine smile touched my lips, despite the fever. I'm just observing. Goodbye, Isabella. I ended the call, letting the phone drop onto the comforter beside me. I closed my eyes, the smile still on my face. She thought she had cut me loose, excised me like a tumor before I could become a liability. But in her haste, in her arrogance, she hadn't realized. She hadn't just fired me. She had just armed me. The trap she had so carefully set for me, she had just walked into herself. The next morning, propped up on pillows and fueled by lukewarm tea and a fierce, quiet clarity, I sent 3 emails. The first was to Mr. Davies and the entire board of directors. In it, I calmly detailed my contributions to the agency's recent successes, including the Maison du Bois and Aura Innovations campaigns. I then attached my comprehensive archive, the original concept decks, the client communications, and, most importantly, the full email chains from the Ether Digital, Loom and Leaf, and financial firm projects, showing Isabella's explicit directives to bypass ethical guidelines and my documented pushback. The second email went to our head of internal compliance, formally flagging the 3 active projects for immediate review due to the questionable directives I had received from Isabella. The third email went to my personal lawyer, a woman I had retained months ago, outlining a clear case for wrongful termination and intellectual property theft. Then I turned off my phone, unplugged my laptop, and focused on the simple, arduous task of breathing. I drank broth. I slept. I watched the dust motes dance in the slivers of sunlight that pierced my blinds. For the first time in 3 years, my mind was quiet. I had laid the map. All I could do now was wait for others to follow it. The pneumonia receded slowly, like a tide going out, leaving me weak but clear-headed. A week passed in absolute silence from Sterling and Grove. A sliver of doubt began to creep in. Had I miscalculated? Was Isabella's influence so absolute that she could make even this disappear? Then, my personal phone rang. It was an unknown number, but my gut told me to answer. Anya. This is Julian Sinclair. It was the chairman of the board, a man known for his old-school integrity and rarely seen outside of shareholder meetings. His voice was deep and gravelly, like stones rolling in the tide. My heart gave a painful lurch. We have reviewed the documentation you sent, he continued, his tone unreadable. And we have had conversations with the teams at Ether Digital, Loom and Leaf, and the others. It appears there are significant discrepancies between the project status we were presented with and the reality. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch. It was a tactic I'd learned from watching Isabella, but I was using it in the service of truth. The board is convening an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. We would be grateful if you would attend. I took a breath, the air still catching in my lungs. Mr. Sinclair, as you may know, I am still recovering from a severe case of pneumonia. The same illness I was battling when Ms. Thorne terminated my employment at nearly 3 in the morning. A heavy sigh came through the phone. Yes, Ms. Petrova. That particular detail is also a significant part of our discussion. Would you be able to join us virtually? I'll be there, I said. That night, sleep was impossible. Not from anxiety, but from a strange, humming anticipation. Years of being diminished, of watching my work be rebranded as someone else's, of being made to feel small and expendable, it was all culminating. The next morning, I logged into the video conference 10 minutes early. My apartment was quiet, the only sound the soft patter of rain against the window. One by one, the serious, inscrutable faces of the board members populated the grid on my screen. Isabella joined last. Her expression was one of polished confidence, right up until the moment her eyes found my face in its small digital square. The mask slipped. What is she doing here? She demanded, her voice sharp with alarm. Mr. Sinclair cleared his throat, his authority radiating even through the screen. Isabella, please. We have matters of grave importance to discuss. For the next hour, I watched in silence as the architecture of my quiet rebellion was revealed. My evidence was presented with cold, irrefutable precision. Emails where Isabella explicitly ordered the use of ethically questionable tactics. Side-by-side comparisons of the client-approved, compliant campaigns I had prepared versus the versions she had championed internally. The most damning evidence came from the clients themselves. Mr. Sinclair read aloud formal statements from all three, confirming that I had been their primary creative contact and that I had, on several occasions, raised concerns about the very risks Isabella had dismissed. They affirmed that they had since been shown the compliant, ethical versions of the campaigns, the ones I had secretly built, and were proceeding with those launches, thanks to my foresight. Isabella's face was a slow-motion collapse. Her confident poise melted away, replaced by confusion, then denial, then a stark, hollow-eyed panic. This is absurd, she finally stammered, looking from face to face, seeking an ally and finding only stone. She's a disgruntled employee. She's twisting things. I have given 15 years of my life to this firm. Mr. Sinclair's expression was unmoved. And in those 15 years, Isabella, how many other employees' work have you presented as your own? The question hung in the virtual air, deadly and unanswered. We will expect your resignation by the end of the day, he continued, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. Our legal team will be in touch regarding the potential liabilities your directives have exposed the firm to. You can't, she whispered, but all the fight had drained out of her. After her square on the screen went black, Mr. Sinclair's gaze turned to me. Anya, he said, using my first name for the first time. On behalf of this board, I want to offer our most sincere apology. We failed in our oversight. We allowed a toxic culture to fester, and you paid the price. We should have seen what was happening. I gave a small, neutral nod, my own emotions a tumultuous sea beneath a calm surface. Your work has been nothing short of brilliant, he went on. And your integrity in protecting both the client and this firm, despite immense pressure, is remarkable. We would like to offer you Isabella's position as Executive Creative Director, effective immediately. There it was. The victory. The vindication. The job, the title, the power I had been denied. It was everything I thought I wanted. I opened my mouth to accept, the word yes already formed on my tongue. But I hesitated. In that split second of silence, I looked around my small apartment. At the stacks of books, the watercolor painting of the coast my mother had done years ago, the rain-streaked window looking out over the city I loved. This was my life. This company, this job, had nearly consumed it. It had allowed a predator to flourish for years, and they were only apologizing now because their bottom line was threatened. Was my ultimate goal really to become the next Isabella Thorne, to sit in her office, to play the same game, only better? I appreciate the offer, Mr. Sinclair, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Thank you. But I need some time to consider it. My priorities have shifted during my illness. His surprise was evident. Of course, Anya. Take the time you need. The offer stands. After the call ended, I sat in the quiet stillness, the only sound the gentle rain. The perfectly executed revenge felt strangely hollow. The downfall of Isabella wasn't the destination. I was beginning to realize it was just the beginning of the journey. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Thinking of you today, my love. How did it go? I looked at her message, and the world came into sharp focus. I thought about her quiet strength, her patience with her garden, coaxing life from the soil. I thought about how this ordeal had been fueled by my need to protect her, but in the end, it was her gentle spirit that was showing me the way forward. The best revenge wasn't taking Isabella's job. It was making it obsolete. I picked up my phone and dialed Julian Sinclair. Mr. Sinclair, Anya Petrova, I said when he answered. I've made my decision. I'm declining your offer for the executive creative director position, I told him, the words feeling more right than any I had ever spoken in a professional context. His sharp intake of breath was audible. Anya, I understand you may be feeling hesitant. But this role comes with a significant increase in salary and influence. I don't want Isabella's job, I interrupted gently. I want to build something new. I want to change the reason a job like hers needs to exist in the first place. For the next hour, I walked him through the vision that had been crystallizing in my mind. A new, semi-autonomous division within Sterling and Grove. A kind of creative incubator built on a foundation of radical transparency and collective ownership. No more shadow contributions or stolen credit. Every person on a project would be named. Compensation would be tied not to hierarchy, but to direct contribution and the success of the work. We would nurture ideas, not poach them. I called it the greenhouse. Our industry talks about innovation but operates on a feudal system, I argued, my voice gaining strength. Clients are tired of the opaque billing, and our most talented young creatives burn out and leave because they are treated as disposable cogs in a machine. We are hemorrhaging talent and trust. Mr. Sinclair was silent for a long time. You are asking us to fund a model that fundamentally undermines our existing structure, he finally said, his skepticism plain. I'm asking you to let me build a lifeboat before the entire ship goes under, I replied. The world is changing. Transparency is no longer a buzzword, it's an expectation. Let me prove that an ethical model isn't just good for morale, it's good for business. The silence stretched again. I could hear the faint sound of a clock ticking on his end. Present it to the full board on Friday, he said at last. I can't promise you anything. That's all I ask. For the next 3 days, I poured what little energy I had into my presentation. This was no longer about me. It was about creating a sanctuary, a place where people like the younger version of myself could thrive, not just survive. The board meeting was an ordeal. I stood before a dozen stern, wealthy faces, my voice still slightly raspy, and laid out my plan, complete with financial projections showing how retaining talent and building client trust would lead to greater long-term profitability. An older board member, a man named Reginald, looked at me over his spectacles. Miss Petrova, this is all very idealistic. But this business is built on relationships, and those relationships are held at the executive level. With respect, sir, I countered, those established practices are why Isabella Thorne was able to operate unchecked for years. The relationships she was holding were built on the work of others. My model isn't idealistic, it's honest. And I believe clients are desperate for honesty. That landed. A few of them shifted uncomfortably. Give me 6 months, I pressed, my gaze sweeping across their faces. A small team. 3 clients. Complete autonomy. If I fail, you've lost very little. But if I succeed, Sterling and Grove will be seen not as a firm that harbored a credit thief, but as a pioneer that reinvented the industry from within. The debate was heated. Finally, Mr. Sinclair called for a vote. It passed. 7-5. Congratulations, Anya, Mr. Sinclair said to me afterward, a glimmer of something like respect in his eyes. You have your greenhouse. Don't make us regret this. A small smile touched my lips. The only thing you'll regret is that we didn't do this sooner. My true victory wasn't in seeing Isabella fall. It was in earning the chance to build something that would stand in direct opposition to everything she represented. Within weeks, I had my team. 5 brilliant, disillusioned creatives I had known for years, people who had been chewed up and spat out by the industry. There was Leo, a data analyst who could find the poetry in spreadsheets, Sophia, a designer whose visual language was breathtaking, and Ethan, a writer whose wit was as sharp as his empathy was deep. Our first office wasn't a sleek glass box, but a sun-drenched loft in the old warehouse part of the building, filled with plants and overflowing white bards. The energy was electric, a palpable sense of hope and shared purpose. Our first test was a mid-sized tech company, Lighthouse Tech. Their marketing director, Priya Kapoor, was notoriously sharp and deeply skeptical of agency promises. Your model sounds like a lovely fairy tale, she said during our pitch, her arms crossed. But how does it work in practice? Who is the ultimate authority? Who do I call when something goes wrong? You call the person responsible for that part of the project, I explained. Their name is right there on the plan. We're removing the layers of management that insulate you from the people actually doing the work. It's more efficient, and it's more accountable. She leaned forward, intrigued. Prove it. I'll give you one product launch. It's a small one. You have 3 months. We poured our hearts into it. It was a collaborative symphony. Leo found a key insight. Ethan wrote copy that sang, and Sophia created a design that was both beautiful and intuitive. We launched the campaign 6 weeks later. The results were stunning. Engagement was double their previous benchmarks. 2 weeks later, Priya's name flashed on my phone. I need to see you today, she said, her voice impossible to read. My stomach clenched. That afternoon, sitting across from her in a minimalist coffee shop, I braced myself for criticism. I showed the results and a breakdown of your team's process to my CEO, she began slowly. He had some questions. I'm happy to address any concerns, I said, my professional mask firmly in place. Her stern expression broke, and a genuine, broad smile lit up her face. His main question was, can they handle our entire marketing portfolio? I blinked. Your entire portfolio? She nodded. Your team delivered better results for a fraction of the budget and in half the time of our main agency. More than that, for the first time, I feel like I have a true partner, not a vendor who is hiding things from me. So, can you handle it? My mind raced, calculating, planning. We'd need to grow the team, I said, a grin spreading across my own face. But yes, absolutely we can. News of our success with Lighthouse Tech traveled fast. Within 4 months, the greenhouse had a waiting list of clients. We had grown to a team of 15, and our division was the most profitable in the entire firm. The board members who had voted against me now spoke of our model with a tone of proprietary pride. Then came the annual industry conference, the very same one where Isabella had stolen my glory. This time, the greenhouse was nominated for the Innovation in Business Practice Award. As I was smoothing down my dress in my hotel room, my phone buzzed with a link from Ethan. The headline made my blood run cold. Isabella Thorne launches Aperture, a revolutionary agency built on radical transparency. She was doing it again. Even now, she was trying to steal my creation. I read the article, my anger turning to a strange sort of pity. Her version was a hollow echo, a marketing gimmick. She had copied the language but missed the entire point. She was promising transparency, but had built a traditional top-down hierarchy beneath the surface. She didn't understand that the model wasn't a set of rules, it was a philosophy. It couldn't work without the foundational belief in shared success, something her ego would never allow. Should we issue a statement? Ethan texted. I thought for a moment, then typed back. No. Let her. The truth has a way of coming out. That evening, when they called our name, I walked to the podium, the award feeling heavy in my hand. I looked out at the sea of faces, and I saw her, sitting at a table near the back, her expression a careful blank. This award belongs to every creative who has ever had their name left off a credit slide, I began, my voice clear and steady. It belongs to every junior strategist who was told to wait their turn while their ideas made someone else famous. Our model at the greenhouse isn't successful because it's a new idea. It's successful because it's an honest one. And what we've learned is that talent flocks to honesty. Clients pay for honesty. You can't build a culture of trust on a foundation of lies. Our eyes met across the crowded room. She looked away first. 6 months later, her agency, Aperture, was floundering. Without a team of brilliant people to exploit, her own mediocrity was exposed. Clients left, citing a lack of vision and poor execution. 1 year after that midnight phone call, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line was just 2 words, coffee. It was from Isabella. Against the advice of my team, I agreed. We met at a neutral cafe, far from the polished towers of the financial district. She looked smaller, the expensive suit hanging on her slightly. The unshakable confidence had been replaced by a brittle weariness. "You were right," she said, staring into her untouched latte. "Your model is working. Mine is not." I simply waited, sipping my tea. "I don't understand it," she confessed, looking up at me, her eyes filled with a desperate, raw confusion. "I did everything you did. I used the same language. Why isn't it working?" The audacity of the question was almost comical. After everything, she still saw it as a formula to be replicated, not a principle to be understood. "Because you can't fake authenticity, Isabella," I said softly. The greenhouse works because at its core, it's about genuinely valuing people. It's about empowering them, trusting them, and celebrating their contributions. You've only ever seen people as rungs on a ladder. You can't build a collaborative community with that mindset. She flinched, the truth of the words hitting home. "So, what do I do?" she whispered. "Help me." I studied her face, searching for the old manipulation, but I saw only a woman who had lost her way. "I can't help you, Isabella. But I can give you some advice," I said, leaning forward. "Stop trying to copy my success. Close your agency. Go somewhere quiet. And for the first time in a very long time, try to create something that is entirely, 100% your own. It doesn't have to be big or revolutionary. A logo for a local bakery. A brochure for a charity. Just experience the feeling of building something from scratch, of seeing your own idea come to life. Maybe then you'll understand." "Your advice is for me to quit?" she asked, a flicker of her old indignation returning. "My advice is for you to begin," I replied. She left without another word. I felt no triumph watching her go, only a quiet, sad sense of closure. I was finally completely free of her shadow. 3 years have passed since that feverish night. The greenhouse model has been adopted by other agencies, and I now speak at business schools about ethical leadership. My mother's arthritis is stable, and she spends her afternoons in her garden, her hands still moving, still creating. Last month, a small, flat package arrived at my office. Inside was an independent arts journal from a small town on the coast. Tucked within its pages was a simple, elegant ad for a local bookstore. The design was clean, the copy heartfelt. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it was solid, authentic, and undeniably competent. At the bottom, in small print, were the creative credits. Designer, I. Thorne. Taped to the ad was a small, handwritten note. "You were right. I'm starting over. Building, not taking. Thank you." I keep that note in my desk drawer. It's not a trophy of her defeat, but a reminder of my own journey. A reminder that the most profound transformation often begins in our darkest moments. Isabella fired me when I was at my most vulnerable, thinking she was cutting a loose end. Instead, she set me free. She set me on a path to not only reclaim my own work, but to build a world where people like her could no longer thrive on the brilliance of others. The most powerful revenge is not destruction. It's creation. It's building something so good, so true, that it makes the old, broken ways irrelevant. It's taking the pain of a betrayal and using it as fuel to build a better future, one where everyone gets to sign their own name to their work.